business or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I have Chuck Failla, founder and CEO of Sovereign Financial Group, an RIA firm based in New York City, with me. I asked Chuck to join me on the podcast because he's co-chairing a really interesting series of events with the folks at InvestmentNews called RIA Labs, and it culminates at the end in the fall with RIA Summit based in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts. It's going to be really exciting. I actually might be participating in that. We'll see, but stay tuned. Anyways, I saw the RIA Labs invite hit my inbox and I was like, this looks interesting. The first event is going to be exploring the future-proof tech stack. And I was like, hey, we talk a lot about tech on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, and a firm's tech stack is a really important component to their Truelytics True Performance Scorecard. So, match made in heaven. You're going to love this episode of the show. And as is the case with a lot of these conversations I have with guests on the show, Chuck and I also ended up covering a few other topics beyond the original idea, such as how to start and run a successful online event, even if you've never run one before, and how to design your firm using the SOC principle so you can grow faster and enjoy your business more. This is a fantastic conversation. I know you're going to love it. Before we get to the chat with Chuck, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, SoundCloud, YouTube, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a topic or a guest for the show, shoot us an email, podcast@truelytics.com, or swing by the website and use the contact form. Okay, let's get to the conversation with Chuck Failla. Chuck Failla, so wonderful to see you this morning. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. It really is exciting for me to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. And I'm super thrilled that we got put together kind of by happenstance. So what was really fascinating is I got this email in my inbox from InvestmentNews, and it talked about this RIA Lab Series that's coming off that you are kicking off. You're one of the chairpersons or whatever of this event.
Yes.
And I was like, that looks really interesting. And so I figured I'll reach out and see if we can, get you guys to come on the show and talk about this type of stuff. So I reached out to Jeff Benjamin, your co-host for the first episode in the RIA Labs series. And he's like, you know what? You need to talk to Chuck because he is much more knowledgeable about tech stack and so forth. And the first episode of or occurrence in the series, I'm not sure. What are you calling it? Event in the series?
The first in the series of the RIA Labs, which is building up to the big day up in your hometown of Boston in November.
Yeah. Fantastic. So the first one is going to be on future-proofing your RIA firm's tech stack. And we talk a lot about tech on this podcast. And I thought, geez, I got to get you on. So I'm super thrilled. Glad Jeff introduced us. So let's jump in. What's the story of this RIA Lab series?
Sure. So I do co-chair it with Jeff Benjamin, who you probably know, of course, is a senior columnist over at InvestmentNews. And he and I have been really partnered up for more than a year now on doing all kinds of different RIA content. So we've done 2 RIA summits together with InvestmentNews, and those just really went over super well. There's so much of an appetite out there for RIA content. So this year, we're kind of building up, as I alluded to before, to this real big in-person summit in November in Boston. Super exciting. And building up to that, we're doing 3 RIA labs to kind of not only build up some excitement for the summit itself, but even more importantly, to help us drive the content for that summit. So these are going to be really hyper interactive virtual workshops, right? The first one we're doing, as you know, is on technology, one of my favorite subjects. Then we're going to do one on what we call fee-based everything, which actually is a phrase that Jeff Benjamin coined, meaning anything you want to do in the RIA space that you were doing with a commission in the broker-dealer world, you could do on a fee basis. That's a really cool one too. And then the third one will be M&A. So not only will we be delivering content during these RIA labs, but as the name would suggest, it's going to be very interactive. We're going to have not just like a Q&A, but also breakout rooms and real group discussions to not only answer questions, but also really kind of poll the audience, engage the audience. What do you want to see at the big summit in Boston in November, right? So really, when it comes time for the big event, we'll have really pretty curated information and content for what people want to hear most.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So, maybe I'll go in November. I've got a reason to go
Yeah,
up to Boston. I got family up there.
sure,
Lots of
sure.
birthdays roll around in November. Maybe I'll come up there. It's gonna be really fantastic. I'm thrilled to have you on the show because, as it would happen, I put on events and I obviously host the podcast and several other shows and so forth. And I've got very accustomed to doing some online stuff in addition to offline things. And in prep, you and I were chatting about how this came to be. How did you get involved with the RIA Labs and Investment News and so forth? And you told me it's been a really interesting journey over these last couple of years. And you've now become, to be honest with you, one of the more preeminent hosts and producers of these types of shows. I think. Look, you're killing it. You have lots of great people on. The content's amazing. So I thought it'd be really great that maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing your journey of how this came to be. And the reason why I think this might be a good topic for our audience here is, events have always been important to financial advisors and RIA
Sure.
firms because, we a lot of the lunch and learns or other type of events have been a way that they've built their business. And with kind of this rapid shift we've had over these last couple of years due to COVID, many of these advisors have started embracing Zoom and online content, but I'm not sure that many of them have shifted to doing online events in the way that you have. And so, whether it's a large event or a small event, they can be really powerful. So,
Sure.
let's jump into it. How did you get started and what have you learned along the way?
Yeah, I mean, largely attributed to just dumb luck, right? I mean, that's really the honest truth. And first, thank you for those, incredibly kind, if not overly generous words. But, I'll now count my fan club to 3. We'll put you in it along with my mom and my wife. So this is fantastic. It's growing by leaps and bounds here. But it's something I love to do. Like I love talking about this business. I really love this business, the financial advice business in general, but really the RIA space in particular, I'm just super passionate about. So whenever I have a chance to write about it, talk about it, I'm really happy to do this. But back to your initial question on kind of what was the kind of the origin story behind all this, and it was really honestly dumb luck, right? And in large part due to COVID. So this started back in the fall of 2020, yeah, when things were kind of getting really bad with the COVID and in-person events were getting canceled. And I was going to do just a small, like a 20 or 30 person little study group, essentially with the FPA here in Connecticut. I'm on the board here. And we love doing study groups and learning from other advisors. I think that's one of the best things about the association. And we decided to not do it in person because of COVID. Who knows who's going to show up, who's not? And I was like, let's just pivot this and try to do a Zoom, right? And I did it literally as a do-it-yourself thing on my personal Zoom account. And I was like, let me reach out to some people. And again, dumb luck, I was able to get in touch with Mike McDaniel, who I'm sure you know is the co-founder and CIO of Riskalyze. And he was like, yeah, I'll show up, virtually. And I was like, you will? I was like, oh, that's great. So then I started talking to other people saying, oh, we have a lot of big name people. Like, for example, I don't know, Mike McDaniel, right? And he was the only, at the time, big name person we had.
Yeah.
And it just kind of snowballed. And all of a sudden, we're having a very legitimate national conference being hosted in actually, I did my office in Stanford then. And we got hundreds of people nationwide to show up. It was crazy. And so one of my guests was a good friend of mine, Jeff Benjamin. We go back some. And, the Investment News folks saw this and saw that it was pretty well received. And they asked if, they could partner. And I was like, I would love to partner with you guys. And that brought us to the first RIA Summit, which was spring of 2021. That went over so well that they did a RI Summit 2 just a few months ago, which was fall of 2021. And it really has evolved into a major component of their content, focusing on, I think, one of the hottest topics in investment news or the investment industry, which is the RIA space. So that's the long and short of it.
I love it. And so I will dive into a couple of things here, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
related to the event thing. One is it's a great illustration of how quickly you can become an influencer in a community by being generous with your information, your time, being a giver, and then reaching out and trying to bring some other people in who also have something to contribute to the community that you're serving, right? So in this case, you're talking to people in your industry, right? You're trying to, rising tide lift all boats type of thing. Like, hey, listen, let's make our industry better. Let's educate us all so that we can do more things. Like, you're not getting clients out of this, right? Like, you're not going hosting an event, an RIA summit type thing, or this and like expecting these other RIAs to become clients of yours, right? So this is about making the industry better, and who knows, maybe you get some recruits out of it. But for advisors and RIA firms who are tuning into this, like, this is an example of how relatively quickly, if you have a niche that you serve or a community that you serve, by putting an event on, even if it's a small one to start, with small ambitions, relatively quickly you can start becoming have your own gravity. I've done that here in Austin with this SoFi Net South by Southwest event that I put on, and for the fintech community in Austin, and for those who come to Austin during South by Southwest, I'm fairly influential there just because I hosted this event. It's a little bit of work. It's not a crazy amount of work, right? Yeah. But it does. It brings influence. So I love that. What have been some of the learnings along the way? It's like maybe some pain points, and then some things like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming when you've been doing this so far.
Yeah, not too many pain points, to be very honest. And what I really learned is it's so much easier getting big name people to join into your event if it's virtual, right? If we asked, Mike McDaniel to fly out to Connecticut, probably not going to happen. But to join us for a 30 or 40-minute panel virtually, pretty easy to do. And we've even noticed that with Investment News, which clearly has much more of a pull than, yours truly. But still, sometimes getting big name people, especially getting 10, 20, 30 big name people all in a physical spot for one day, that's hard to do. But to have them zoom in, it's very simple. So one of the great things about the virtual event space is you can get really big name people much more easily than you could do it in person. Now, that said, we're super eager to get back to going in person, but there is something to be said about that virtual aspect, which is super convenient. You can really get a broad audience easily. And for me, the one thing I really learned is it's so much easier to get those big name folks to commit to a 30-minute Zoom than a 3-day in and out travel deal to come to a convention center.
I love that you pointed that out, because I've noticed the same thing. I've noticed it during the pandemic, but I also noticed it prior to that. The people are way more accessible than you think they are online and in that type of fashion, right? That people, if you're reaching them out to them via their social channels or email or whatever, and your ask isn't too big, you'll be surprised. Well, like to your point, like if you're asking me to get on a plane, fly to your event, and you're telling me there's only gonna be 30 people there, I might not be super interested in coming unless I know that these people are like really, really tightly in my wheelhouse and likely to convert into clients or something, right? But if you say, hey, listen, we've got a relatively small group. It is in your target market or your audience or community that you want to be a part of. We've got them coming online. Yeah, I can carve out a half an hour, like you said, for a quick talk and do it. And people are, the other thing I've loved about this experience, and I look, looking for positives everywhere, I guess. It's humanized everybody. It's kind of brought everybody down to the same level. It's like I've been in just about everybody's living room, if you will. I mean, so this is my home office behind me, right? So everybody can see, like, oh, that's what Mike's place looks like. And I've been in lots of other people's living rooms, dining rooms, kitchens. We had a podcast we just recorded where one of the guests was. I've been in his parents' kitchen in Florida, basically, because he was staying with his parents during the winter last winter. He's like, oh yeah, you'll fire up a Zoom and we'll talk. So it's been great. You're connecting with people in a much more real level. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think that's awesome. A great point. And I feel the same way. Like you're really feeling like you're being invited into their home as you are today, right? This is my living room back behind me. And it gives that extra level of connection, which has been an amazing, and one of the upsides of COVID, if there is such a thing, right? But it's been this, and we've been able to have some really deep connections with people. We've had pretty serious hires, speaking for me personally at our firm, some pretty big hires for us with people that we have never seen in person, all virtual. And that would have been unheard of a few years ago.
Isn't that fascinating that So I've done classes, seminars on using LinkedIn and social media for financial advisors over the years.
Mhm.
And in the early days, we're going back to like 2011, 2012, I used to get this questions all the time about like, I don't know, what if somebody I don't know asks to connect with me on LinkedIn or something like that? It was basically like, what do kind of a very big concern about stranger danger, if you will, from grownups online. And it was fascinating to see like, well, if somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn and I don't know them, but they look like they could be relevant, I'm not just going to click no. Maybe I reply with a, hey, Chuck, thank you very much for reaching out. I'm not sure that we've met. Tell me a little bit more about why you want to connect.
Sure.
And then we have an actual conversation. And to your point, you'd be surprised. People you've never seen in person, you can have a vibrant and very productive relationship with them. And that goes for clients or new hires or whatever, even if they're not in the same room with you. And all you've done is ever maybe Zoomed and chatted back and forth online.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. And what I'll say one more thing about this as well is folks that we have started a relationship virtually via Zoom. And again, we've had some pretty significant hires. And then when I finally meet them in person, it doesn't feel that different. Right. I feel like I already know this person. There's no like, oh, I didn't expect this person to be like this or like that. It's pretty much right in line with what I was expecting, which is pretty cool.
Except for the height thing. That's the thing that
height
gets you every time. You can see
and
somebody
the girth,
like,
I speak for myself, but yeah.
The number of times we actually was just talking about that same gentleman I was talking about where I bet it was in his living room, Kyle Simpson from FS Investments. You know, I bet in his, you know, I've seen him on Zoom for like 2 years. I'd only seen this guy like this. And then we finally meet each other. Like, neither one of us is as tall as we thought we would be, right? Like, like I'm 5'10", you know what I mean? But he's like, man, I thought you were like 6'3", 6'4", or something. You know, well, plus I talk about basketball because my kids play about basketball. So maybe there's an assumption that I must be taller than I am. Like, nope, I'm not tall at all. Point guard height. That's it. Anyway, oh my gosh, it's too funny. You know, switching gears a little bit to your firm, because it's really fascinating to see. Like you mentioned, you have great passion for the business, and you have grown your firm over the years. And you've been in this, like me, you've been in this space for, I assume, most of your entire career, right? Your entire adult life has been in this
for the most part.
space.
Yeah.
Maybe you had, yeah. Well, according to LinkedIn, you started Sovereign Financial Group, your firm, back in 1999.
Yes.
And prior to that, you were in CLF Asset Management, which I assume the CLF, little surprise, stands for Chuck L. Failla. You were in that for 5 years. So you've been in the advisory business for a long time, and not to age us, right? By the way, I think we're all the same age. So, but like, you see some stuff, right? You see some things evolve over the years, and you've watched things modernize into what we have today. So tell me a little bit about how you built Sovereign, and what have been some of the biggest transitions for the firm, and maybe for you personally all along the way, as you've probably transitioned from being a solo guy to running a good sized team.
Yeah. So when I first started, I was really a stockbroker. I was, CLF and also Sovereign prior to 2019 was really just a DBA, right? Doing a business as. I was really a registered rep with Raymond James and then some other firms. But I would always brand myself. And it was actually initially going to be CF Asset Management, but that was taken. So I had to go with my confirmation name, Ludovico, to make it CLF Asset Management, which I never really used that before, but it kind of stuck and I kind of liked it. But, one of the biggest differences, and this kind of ties into technology quite a bit, and I was just speaking to someone about this earlier this week, is processing trades, right? So when I first started doing trading, I mean, it was a form, right? With the carbon copy in between, right? And the red was sell, the black was buy. And if you want to buy something, you pick up the black form and you write out the ticker symbol and how many shares, and you give one to your sales assistant, you give one to the traders, and one you retain, and it all gets reconciled that night, which is incredibly clunky. I mean, I can't even imagine running a business that way. And now you fast forward, and we're looking to do rebalancing firm-wide to take advantage of some market moves, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, click, 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 and it's done. So the transformation on a lot of things, but not least of which is the trading aspect, has been absolutely phenomenal. What we're able to do, even something relatively cutting edge like direct indexing, right? Which is like, ooh,
Mm.
that's really cool. That's becoming democratized as well, right? We're able to do that all in house now with just technology. And what that ends up doing is cutting our costs, which means we can deliver it to our advisors and our clients at a lower cost. So it's driving just a ton of costs out of the system. And that's also a big thing. I mean, man, back what is it, 25 years ago, right? A little bit more than a quarter
Mhm.
century when I was a stockbroker, you know, the trading costs and the friction with that is far more than what it is today by a
Yeah.
pretty serious multiple. So it's easier to do business, it's easier to run your business, and you're able to do it with much lower cost to you and your client. And that trend just keeps on going. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've seen.
Yeah. I remember, so speaking of the cost thing, when I started working at Fidelity, the average like cost per trade, commission for a trade. This is supposed to be a discount brokerage, right?
Yeah,
It was
right.
like it was like $24.95 or something like that to trade a stock.
Hmm.
And then of course if you were an active trader, that price came down or whatever. But there was no such thing as free trading. And so for anybody who's entering the market right now, would be like, what? And
Of
also,
course.
when I started in my career, I was answering phones for mutual fund companies, and I've mentioned that a few different times on this pod. I work for Boston Financial Data Services, which is a transfer agency for mutual fund companies, and they also provided things like customer service type things. So somebody would call, and you'd say something like, "Thank you for calling the Warburg Pincus funds. This is Mike Langford. How can I help you?" And somebody would say, "Hey, what's the closing price for whatever the fund was?" Like there was no internet.
Right.
It was
Right.
1994, right? So
Sure.
you called on the phone to ask like what. So think about the cost in there, right? And so I remember again with Fidelity, we used to have an average cost per call, fully loaded, of like $14 per call. That's how large the phone operations were, right? Like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Every time somebody called Fidelity, it cost them basically $14 for the fully loaded cost of all the employees, the buildings, and all that type of stuff. And so huge campaign in the very early 2000s there to drive people from the phones to the internet to just kind of get that cost down. So it
Of
was
course.
crazy. And of course, customers liked it better. That's pretty fascinating. So you've seen a lot of that type of change. What have been some of the things that for you personally you've had to adjust? Maybe when you start out kind of having to write out forms and so forth, how have you had to grow? I mean, I would imagine you've had to grow as a leader too, right? Because when it was just
Sure.
you, and then now you have a team and you're in multi offices. You're not just in one spot.
That's right. So, the whole philosophy that our firm now has kind of evolved into has always been my personal philosophy, which is in the most basic terms, an advisor should not be filling out forms, right?
Yeah.
And I really believe that. And, the advisor has a certain skill set, whether it's the analytics to put together a financial plan or the asset allocation, depending on what kind of advisor you are, and then communicating that with the client.
Mm.
That's very valuable, and that's a very different skill set than making sure you fill out the TOD form correctly, right? Very different skill set, and we try to remove all that friction from my life as an advisor, but then also the advisors that we work with. And again, going back to technology, that's a big part of this, right? So the idea of being
Mm.
able to deliver your value in the most frictionless way possible, right, without getting bogged down with, you know, uh, trades or writing out tickets, which obviously no one does anymore, or filling out forms, right? All that should be a separate process that's handled, and I like to joke around with my firm, by SOC, and SOC is someone other than Chuck, right? I should not be doing that, and Sak is a very popular person at Sovereign because there's certain things that advisors should not be doing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that whenever an advisor is on that trajectory of going from, starting off, getting clients, getting established, and that growth path, at some point they have to offload all those friction points that's slowing them down from either developing the size book that they want or being able to properly service the book that they have, right? Because you can't possibly do both, right? If you have a small book, you could do everything, obviously. But as you get more established and a larger book of business and more clients to deal with, you have to get rid of those pain points, those friction points. And that's something that I've always been really in tune with. And I've always loved technology and always been kind of an early adopter, sometimes to a fault. But when you get technology to work properly for anything, and certainly for our business, that's the case, it just makes your life not only easier, a lot more efficient, and you can deliver better value to your clients, which is ultimately what we're trying to always do.
That's great. I love that you brought up the sock. I love that someone other than Chuck. Because it's a recognition of being a business owner versus being, just an independent. Like I'm a, as you said, you got your start as a stockbroker.
Yeah.
Many advisors hit a plateau, not necessarily because they're incapable of bringing on other clients. It's because they reach a capacity issue. Like I
Sure.
can only serve this many people in my book of business, as they'll call it, or in their practice, versus they're thinking of it as a business. And any business, like most businesses that start out solo, at some point in time, you're going to have to hire somebody to do some of the work, right? And
Right.
at some point in time, you may have to, step away from the business because you want to go on vacation or you have a family emergency or whatever. And that business should be able to operate without you. But I think just as importantly, we all have limitations. And it's not just time, the constraints. It's also like, hey, look, I know I'm smart, but I'm not the smartest at everything, right? And I'm probably not the smartest person I know. I hope I'm not the smartest person I know. And I'm probably not the most capable person. At some point in time, I'm going to need other human beings involved here and leveraging them and technology for this business to really, really grow beyond what I could ever do, right? And you hope that you find high quality people who are natural leaders and go-getters on their own.
Absolutely. I was listening to one of your podcasts, and the gentleman's name is escaping me right now, but he wrote a book about getting your business sell ready. I think it was one of your more recent ones, right?
Yes.
And he said something that I thought was just absolutely brilliant, and it really resonated with me. And he was like, "Okay, you want to get your business sell ready, but I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but his point was you get it sell ready, which means get it organized, get your processes set, and get it nice and tidy,
Mm-hmm.
get it organized. And you may find that you don't want to sell it because it's so easy to run now,
Yeah.
right?" And I thought that was great because the way I see it, once I took all those things off of my plate that I don't like to do, the compliance, the reviews of the paperwork and filing this and doing the minutia trades. I love the concepts. I love the relationships with clients. That's the stuff that I love. And then for me, at least, you remove all the other stuff I don't like and get it organized, just like your previous guest was talking about.
Yeah.
Why would you ever sell? Right? I mean, have a
Yeah.
contingency plan if you get hit by a bus, or I think you were saying get hit by an Uber. Was that you? I was having that conversation.
Yeah.
In case you get hit by an Uber.
That's actually Terry Mullins'
Okay.
quote. By the way, one of the founders of TrueLytics, but it is such a great one. Like instead of getting hit by a bus, we're getting hit by Ubers now.
Exactly. But that's the case. I mean, get set for that because you have. And at the point now we are with Sovereign, we have not just clients depending on us, but we have advisors and their clients depending on us. So we have continuity and everything else. But short of my getting hit by an Uber or some, lack of cognitive ability, why would I stop? I mean, this is all the stuff that I love to do, right? Because I was able to remove the stuff that I don't like to do. And that's bringing on great people and great technology lets you do that.
I love that you brought that up. We all have things we don't like doing in our job, right? Like that's, and sometimes we just have to do them or whatever. But if you remove the things that suck, it's not so bad, right? And
of course,
what's really been a fascinating thing for me to discover, and you're constantly learning, right? Even in your 40s, you're picking up new things, and some of the things that I think are just terrible to do, there are other people who love doing them,
right?
And some of the things that I just find absolutely effortless and joyful to do, like talking. Like I love public speaking. I love doing these podcasts. There are people who'd sooner die than get onto a microphone or camera and record something, right? They just hate it. They would rather do any other job you have available to them than this. So just recognize that there are people who like doing the things that you hate doing.
Oh, of course. That's absolutely the case, right? I mean, not that they're horrible things, but you got to find the right person for the right job. And there are people that love that, that kind of OCD and kind of, I mean that in a bad way, but just like love to get things super hyper organized and get the form all set. That's just not me, right? But there are people that do really enjoy that. And you're right, finding that fit is is the key.
So let's talk a little bit about how you did it. And I know we've got, like 15 minutes left together, so I'll be cognizant of that time. So you built a firm, starting, you were solo, and you built a firm. Now you've got 9 different offices, and I think I saw 13 members of the team listed on the website. I'm not sure if there's other members of the team who aren't on the website. So
there's a few more new hires we have to put on there. So I think we're at about 16 right now, 15 or 16.
Okay. So I guess a couple of questions. So how did you grow the firm? Is it been via acquisition, or is it a purely organic, or a combination of the two?
Yeah. Well, and this is probably something that's overused quite a bit, the kind of field of dreams thing, but you build it and they will come.
Okay.
And all Sovereign is an infrastructure built, by me to make sure that I don't do anything I don't love to do, as we were kind of touching upon. That really is it in a nutshell. And then the way we've grown, and we've really literally doubled in size each year for the past 3 years since we went RIA. And I don't think we'll continue on that trajectory, but it's really been phenomenal for the past 3 years. Because what we do is say, look, here's our systems, and they're designed to let an advisor like me, who doesn't like to do anything but the interaction, the concepts, the strategy, and everything else is taken off my plate. That's what we've built here. And some people have been exposed to that, and a lot that have decided to join up with us. And that's been good. And that gives us more scale. And it's almost like a cooperative, right? Back when I was in college, University of Connecticut, go Huskies, I was very involved with the student credit union, right? Which was a pretty cool thing. It was a real credit union, a real financial institution that was actually truly run by students, and I loved it, right? It was a great experience. And credit unions are cooperatives, right? That's the structure, right? Where the users are the owners and all this type of stuff. And in a lot of ways, I look at Sovereign as essentially a cooperative, right? So as advisors come in, we get better purchasing power. It brings all of our costs down, and we could share resources, share the different staff people that we have, the traders, the trading systems. And that's really what I like about it. So it's a very homogeneous group in the sense that there's a very similar pattern for the kind of advisor that would join up with us. They tend to be more financial planning oriented because we're strong on financial planning. They have certain investment ideas that are similar to ours, which tend to be more, macro and asset allocation as opposed to some other strategies, although it's not necessary. But what we've done is create almost a cooperative in the sense that we are all working toward that same goal and delivering low-cost services for our clients. And as we get larger, we're able to bring all of our costs down and get better resources.
It's interesting that this really kind of brings us almost like full circle from where we started, right? That where you created a sphere of influence with some a way of doing business that you're passionate about, things that you care about, and it allowed you to attract like-minded and or complementary pieces to the business, right? And I think that's so important for folks to do. So that's kind of like how I'm thinking about wrapping this up. Want to have a teaser for the RIA Labs event you have coming up. It's scheduled for February 23rd, so which this episode will be published before that. But I think you mentioned that a recording of the event will be available as well. So, and we'll make sure we get that linked up in the show notes for this. So anybody who happens to hear this episode after the fact will be able to check out that RIA Labs. So the first one is on the future-proofing your tech stack. So I wonder if you can give us a little bit of a sneak peek. Don't give away the whole secret sauce. They have to tune in for that.
You bet.
But what do we mean when we talk about the term future-proof tech stack? What are some of the core elements of a tech stack that allow it to be robust and flexible enough for the RIA firm today, 2022, and then maybe the RIA firm in 2032 as well?
Sure. So the whole idea is, for me at least, would be integration, right? Because there's so many different components. So what are the basic components? You have account portfolio management, you have trading, you have the CRM, and usually you have like a risk tool, right? Those are the real base components. And you could add all kinds of other stuff to that as well, but those are the basic ones. And as long as there's good integration between all those different components, right? If one no longer meets your needs, or perhaps there's a better mousetrap, you could swap out one component without having to swap out the entire system. In a nutshell, that's what we're talking about. And a great example I'll use, and this upcoming lab is actually kind of was born out of an article I wrote for Investment News, which was called RIA Technology, Can We All Just Get Along? Right. And what I like about this, and this will be a little bit of a shout out for some of the players that were in that article, but I'm really impressed by how they all work together. So for us, we have Orion, Salesforce, eMoney, and Riskalyze. That's the core of our tech stack. But what's awesome, and I really mean this, is Orion actually owns a competitor, Riskalyze, and Orion owns a competitor to eMoney. But rather than saying, no, you have to use our proprietary stuff,
Yeah.
they're very open architecture, and they play very well in the sandbox, as they say, with those other players. So that allows us to maintain, because we had Riskalyze before and eMoney before, rather than telling all of our advisors, oh, we got to switch because we're going over to this platform, because the Orion platform is fantastic for what we use for rebalancing and the portfolio management stuff. We didn't have to retool everything because of their ability to integrate. And that's what we're talking about with how important technology integration is to future-proof, right? If for some reason we want to swap out one, we don't have to swap out the whole thing. And that's what we're going to be focusing on a lot for this upcoming lab.
I love that. And that concept is becoming more and more part of our lives, right? We see it elsewhere before financial services got it, but many of the services you use in your daily life, like your email provider or whatever is, you can be used with any other email client, right? And social media has a lot of different APIs that plug into it so that you can share a story you saw on Flipboard to Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook without having to copy a link, go there and paste it in manually, right? So those are some basic ones, but we're seeing more and more of this, and it gives you a lot more flexibility, less of the walled garden approach that you and I can remember from the old days.
Exactly. Open architecture, it's key. And especially for people looking to go RIA building their tech stack, it'll be information that'd be good for them to have.
Fantastic. So before I let you go, one last thing. I want to get maybe your crystal ball prediction of the future, right? So beyond tech stacks, what are your thoughts of the future of the RIA business? Is there anything that you find yourself thinking about, like kind of obsessively, like this is the thing that's coming in the future and it's how we're going to shape our business?
Yeah. So very broadly, and the numbers back this up, there's a huge move toward the RIA space. And why is that, right? So what is really the difference? So RIAs tend to be fee-based and fiduciaries. What about the broker-dealer side? Well, it's transaction-based. And the way I explain this, so let's say I'm speaking with an advisor that's maybe in her 30s, right? And I say, think about one of your friends who's in their 30s right now, right? In 15 years, they'll be 45, right? And starting to be kind of your target market, right? They're established a little bit more. They're looking to save more. That's who you want as a client. So think of that person who's 30 years old today. In 15 years, do you think they're going to buy a variable annuity that has a 7% commission? They're not.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. That's opinion, obviously, but
Sure.
I don't think so, right? Because consumers are getting much more in tune with what is a fiduciary. I mean, when I first started as a fiduciary, which was 23 years ago, whenever I had a prospect come into my office, I'd be like, well, I'm working as a fiduciary. And they're like, so? They didn't understand the concept.
Sure.
Now, fast forward a couple of decades, at least 1 out of 3 prospective clients, they are asking me, are you a fiduciary? And that trend's not going to stop. And especially for that next generation of wealth coming up, they're going to look more for fiduciary-based, I would say, advice than transaction. And that bodes very well for the RIA space as a whole.
I think you're right on a lot of those points, because you think about the gateway for most people's financial services journey is right here, right?
Yeah.
It's their smartphone. Everybody is carrying around the ability at all times to type into Google, how do I choose a financial advisor, right?
Yeah.
What do I look for in a financial advisor?
Right.
So they're going to have those types of things, the stories, looking for fee-based, looking for advisors who are fiduciary. Those stories pop up in the top results for Google every single time. Speaking of costs and so forth, those types of stories are in there frequently. And we also have to remember that many clients are getting their onboarding via some sort of free trading platform or robo-advisory platform. If, when you're young and 22 years old and you don't have any money, but you want to start investing, you're getting your start on these platforms that are offering a lot of stuff kind of for free. So when costs start getting involved, there's going to be some, what am I paying for? I want to know what I'm paying for, right?
What's
They
the
get
value?
concerned with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is value to be had, and it's got to be communicated. But the value is probably not, here's a product that if I sell enough of this month, I get to go to the Bahamas, which I know that doesn't happen much anymore, but it wasn't too long ago where that was the reality.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's fantastic. Well, Chuck Failla, I know we have a hard stop here, so I want to really give you a hearty thank you for joining me, carving some time out of your schedule to come on. Everybody who's listening or watching, make sure you check out RIA Labs. It's linked in the show notes. And we're going to get everybody up to that RIA Summit as well in Boston in November, by the way. Should have been Boston in the summer, but we'll talk about that next time. All right. Thank you very much, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Mike, thank you very much. A real pleasure. Would love to come back sometime soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge thanks to Chuck Failla from Sovereign Financial Group for joining me. I'm really looking forward to the RIA Labs series, and I'm extra looking forward to RIA Summit up in Boston in the fall. I mean, come on, man. I get a chance to go up to Boston, be with my people, hang out. Good food, good people. Does not suck. Okay. As always, please do make sure, if you haven't done so already, you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform and send in your questions and suggestions for topics or guests. Hit me up, podcast@truelytics.com. Love to hear from you, okay? That's it. That's all I got for you today. Please make sure you stay safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.